I came across another misunderstanding about how evolution occurs, and claiming that since their straw man disproves evolution, it's proof that there's an intelligent creator being out there. Let's take a look.
We know that every needle must have its craftsman and owner. And as we know, every letter must be written by someone. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense, right? Well, then how can it be that an extremely well-ordered human being has no ruler?
This ignores the fact that unlike design tools like needles or a written language, human beings, and other biological animals, were formed by the guess-and-check method of natural selection. That is, there are slight changes, or mutations, between generations of organisms. If those changes are beneficial, the organism with the mutation is more likely to breed and pass on those mutations, eventually resulting in creatures completely different from their ancestors. To get back to your needle analogy, if we had pieces of metal that were able to self-replicate with slight differences between generations, and only the ones with those needle-like shape continue to reproduce, then we could eventually breed a needle. The problem with this is that it would take an extremely long time, and designing and making a needle is a much simpler process. That too.
Some people are ignoring the miracle of creation. They claim that the human came into existence by atoms that came together. They also say that the human is only a speaking animal. Isn't this absurd?
Not absurd at all. In fact, I believe I said something about humans being animals fairly recently. This ignores the fact that unlike design tools like needles or a written language, human beings, and other biological animals, the good old days. I can't believe how young I look back then. From every genetic, physiological, and morphological standpoint, human beings are animals. Sure, we're different from most other animals.
There are two things which clearly differentiate the human species from animals. One, we use cutlery. Two, we're capable of controlling our sexual urges.
Well, at least I use utensils. But being unique doesn't mean you aren't part of the group. Bats, for example, are unique as the only mammals that have true flight, but that doesn't mean they aren't mammals. In the same way, humans are unique and tend to think of ourselves as better or more intelligent than other animals. Although, that's debatable.
On the planet Earth, man had always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much. The wheel, New York, wars, and so on. Whilst all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins believed that they were more intelligent than man for precisely the same reasons.
People who claim that don't even know which nonsense they have to accept with the denying of a creator.
We don't have to accept anything just because we don't give credence to the claims of an intelligent being that created the universe. Even if we didn't have an explanation for the development of human beings, that doesn't mean we have to slot an intelligent creator into the gaps of our knowledge.
So, this is why we will ask you a few questions in order to make you think more in detail about this topic. The human body consists of different parts, like our hands and feet, or inner organs. How is it possible that the blind atoms can create hands, feet, and organs?
As mentioned before, the guess-and-check method of natural selection is what guided our development. The atoms in our body didn't design or plan anything about us. If a mutation is beneficial, it'll be kept. That's why we're able to trace out, for example, the similarities between fish fin bones and the bones in human hands. As some species of fish moved onto the land for whatever reasons, the ones with offspring that were slightly more adapted to life on land thrived, passing on their adaptations to their offspring. The hell was that? Eventually, these adaptations and mutations built up to the structural forms that we have now, like hands, feet, and organs. No intelligence or planning necessary.
Just think about it. Atoms don't possess any knowledge about life conditions, but they should be able to create a human body that is viable. Really? How can the atoms of the eye create an eye that is able to see the sun, while they are not able to see the sun themselves?
The molecules that make up the eye don't need to be able to see by themselves in order to create sight. In the same way that individual aluminium atoms are not capable of flight, when placed together in the right configuration and moved in the right direction, they can cause lift. The molecules in the eye themselves don't see, but when configured together, will produce vision. The evolution of the eye is one that creationists often bring up, but when given a bit of rational thought, it's not much of a shock that it happened. A mutation that created a simple light-sensitive patch on an early organism would be an incredible boon, even if it did nothing than register the difference between light and dark. As a useful adaptation, it would quickly spread through the population, since organisms with a light-sensitive patch could outperform organisms that didn't have that mutation. Over numerous generations, the simple light-sensitive patch was further refined by additional mutations, and eventually became the eyes we have today. No intelligent designer, nor intelligent atoms needed.
Are you saying that your ear atoms have created your ears while they are not able to hear themselves?
Like the eye, the individual molecules of the ear don't need to be able to hear to create hearing. Hearing is basically vibration picked up and translated into sounds. The old question about a tree falling in the woods and nobody hears it, does it make a sound?
Absolutely.
Well, no. The crash creates vibrations traveling through the air, but if they're never picked up, it doesn't get perceived as sound. When you go to a particularly loud rock concert, you can feel the sound waves against your whole body because your skin can pick up vibrations similarly, but in a much less sophisticated way than your ear. Again, like the eye, a mutation that helped an organism to sense vibrations in the air would be incredibly useful, and would, over time, evolve into organs that specifically focus vibrations in the air into sounds. The competitive advantage of having sophisticated vibration-sensing organs led those organisms to outcompete and outbreed organisms without them. As a side note, and not to get too far off track, but eyes, which are considered far more complex, evolved about 40 million years before the ears developed. This is because, while eyes are useful for our aquatic ancestors, a dedicated organ for hearing was not. Being submerged in water made it easy for aquatic organisms to detect various vibrations around them. It was only after creatures moved onto the land, with a thinner atmosphere, that a dedicated organ for detecting vibrations around them was useful and the evolution of the ear began. In fact, some of our ear bones were originally the jaw bones in fish. You see, the environment exerts the pressure to change organisms and drive evolution.
And the atoms of the tongue cannot taste, but they create the tongue? How should this all be possible?
The ability to taste is even easier to explain. The tongue started out as simply a muscle to help food move down the throat. Now, it turns out that eating the wrong food is bad for animals, while eating food that is useful for our survival is good for us. Organisms evolved the ability to recognize sweet foods which contain the energy we need to survive and to find that taste appealing. They also gained the ability to find the taste revolting to foods that had gone rotten and would make them sick. That adaptation helps an organism immensely and will be passed on quite rapidly.
Come on, does it really make sense to you?
No, you're a straw man. A misunderstanding of the development of biological functions doesn't make any sense. That's why nobody thinks it's an adequate explanation for biological structures. You should have done a bit of research to find out if any biological scientist holds on to the idea that individual atoms need to have the ability to see and hear and taste in order to be part of structures that have those abilities. To me, it makes sense that small mutations occur in every generation, and if those mutations are beneficial, they're kept. Over time, those mutations build up, and populations change until they're considered new species.
Let's keep going. We all know that atoms have no patterns, right? Then how are the atoms able to create organs which were designed so perfectly that you would think specific patterns were used for each one of them? The organs themselves are a miracle of creation.
Similar to the external organs you brought up, internal organs are not difficult to explain from an evolutionary standpoint. As we became multicellular creatures, some cells specialized and started filling specific roles in the body. From pumping fluid around the body to expelling waste, internal organs help the body thrive. Organisms that had mutations to make these specialized cells more efficient were passed on.
How can simple atoms place the organs at the perfect place in our bodies? More than that, how can they even know the numbers of the organs that are essential for our bodies? All these activities are only possible with specific attributes like an internal life, will, knowledge, and an internal might. And you give all these attributes to atoms which don't even possess one of them? Really?
The reason we have the number of organs we do is because our bodies, like all machines, use energy to keep running. Having organs is costly in terms of energy. Evolution balances out the cost and energy organs take versus the benefit to the organism. We have two eyes because binocular vision gives depth perception in a wider field of vision, both useful adaptations worth the cost. Whereas a second heart would cost the body's resources without much of a benefit it would provide. As for why the organs are where they are in the body, again, that's because they would evolve to be in the best suited places. It isn't shocking at all that the heart and lungs developed with a bone cage around them for protection, and the brain's encased in a thick skull. creatures with their vital organs unprotected would not compete well with ones that are protected. And the placement of organs can change when there is pressure to do so. When the dolphin's ancestor first moved back to the water from the land, its nostrils were at the front of the body. As it spent more time in the water, the nostrils slowly, between generations, moved to a more advantageous position behind the top of the head, helping it thrive by enabling it to breathe without bringing its head out of the water.
Okay, let's come to a conclusion. There are two options. Either you say that atoms are the owner of endless knowledge, will, and might, or you say that these atoms are the creation of...
No, it's not the either-or situation that you brought up. We don't need to have intelligent atoms to design biological organisms like you say. The simple guess-and-check method of natural selection, where random mutations occur between generations, and if these mutations are beneficial, they'll be passed on and spread through the population, resulting in the plethora of biodiversity that we see today. The ability to explain biodiversity neither proves nor disproves a deity. Even showing that evolution definitely occurs doesn't mean that a deity that created the universe doesn't exist. And if anybody was to disprove evolution, that doesn't mean we have to use God to fill our ignorance. If you want to show that Allah, or really any deity, exists, you need to provide evidence that points to one, not simply say, I can't explain this, so it must be done by a god.